Welcome back. 29 people have lost their lives after incessant rainfall caused by floods in Bihar. While it has stopped raining since last night, the capital city of Patna and several other parts of the state continue to remain flooded. Bihar Chief Minister Nitish Kumar held a review meeting with officials of flood-affected districts and conducted an aerial survey, while Union Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad met with district magistrates at his residence in Patna. 19 NDRF teams have been deployed in the state. Take a look.
अभी धीरे धीरे से किसी तरह से जा रहा है।
अगर कुछ भी हुआ तो
चला जाएगा गंगा जी।
बहुत पानी बेतुफान पानी चल रहा है।
बच्चा भी कोई
बच्चा दो ठो अभी तक कोनो खबर नहीं है। खोज रहे हैं बहा गया है क्या हुआ नहीं हुआ।
Ganga level is high. If Punpun level is high, where the water will go? Fortunately, Ganga Ji has come a little down. Today there is no much of rain. So let's hope for the best. We are doing our best.
Well, the capital city of Patna is one of the worst affected. The city is continuing to drown in waist-deep water. Police stations, hospitals, homes and offices have been flooded. Times Network's Prashant sent us this report.
People, I just want to show you what's happening here in Patna right now. And one of the areas is completely inundated in the water. Jagga will give the visuals of how things look like here. And we are on one of the rescue trucks, tractors, if I can say so. You see the entire area is completely flooded. Entire area is completely inundated in water, with water entering the houses of people. You see these people outside their homes now. And we have traveled quite a bit on this. I've never personally seen something like this in Patna. I hail from Patna, but I've never seen something like this actually happening in Patna with the kind of condition that today prevails here. You see this particular lane that Jagga is showing you, completely underwater. The ground floor is completely under it. Water has entered into the houses of people. ये बताइए भैया आप कहाँ पे रहते हैं और ऐसा पानी आपने पिछली बार कब देखा था?
ये पिछली बार ऐसे 4 साल पहले दुर्गा पूजा में ही देखे थे। विजयदशमी के कहानियों को। बस ऐसा पानी दोबारा देखे नहीं है।
ये देखिए हालत यहाँ पे क्या हालत हो रखा है। जगह दिखाइए इनको. And these are rescue trucks, tractors that you are seeing on your screen right now. All the vehicles are completely trapped. The cars are not moving. See, look at this. This bike has been washed away in the water. So clearly this is happening right under the nose of the Chief Minister.
In fact, my colleague Shyam Sundar is live with us from Patna right now. Shyam, thank you for joining us. Could you please tell us if the government could have done anything to be better prepared for something like this?
Well, yes, absolutely. The government could have done much more and been much more prepared to control the situation which the citizens of Patna are facing today. Now, just last evening, the government of Bihar had contacted the central government for assistance, for Air Force choppers, for dewatering machines from Coal India. Now, just yesterday, the Chief Minister was holding video conferencing meetings and was holding a high-level meeting here. But certainly this preparedness could have been done much before earlier, because Patna was inundated in water for the past 3 days. Water level was rising. The water level in the river Ganges was also rising. And knowing everything, there was a weather forecast that it would be raining heavily on Sunday and Saturday. But despite that, it seems that the government was caught napping and everything. The government took it very lightly, and that was the reason why the people are facing hardships here in Patna. Now, certainly, floods and waterlogging is now nothing new for Patna. Every year you get to see floods. Bihar has also seen the Kosi tragedy. But apart from seeing everything and undergoing everything, it seems that the government was not prepared for it, and that is why they are calling it a natural calamity, someone calling it a nakshatra. So certainly it shows the callousness and the insensitivity of these politicians as well. But some localities of Patna where the situation is very grim. If you talk of Rajendra Nagar, if you talk of Kadam Kuan, if you talk of Bhutnath Road, certainly there is water. The water level is much high there. The ground floor is completely underwater. The water level is touching the first floor, and people there are without food, water and electricity for the past 3 days. They clearly complained that whatever stock they had, everything is finished. There's been no proper help from the NDRF or the SDRF teams. We saw today that how early morning the Deputy Chief Minister of Bihar, Sushil Modi, had to be evacuated from his home. in Rajendra Nagar. But certainly, since he was a politician, he enjoyed everything. So certainly he and his family was evacuated. But what about the rest of citizens who are starving there, who are still fighting it out there? They even complained that there was no proper facilities, no proper relief carried out. It was only after today in the evening that the Air Force choppers which had come, that they were dropping food packets. So certainly the callousness approach of the government was exposed. The government was not prepared to tackle this. And one more important thing is that there's no proper drainage and sewerage system in Patna, and that is the reason why every year you get to see such water logging. And this time, since it rained heavily, certainly there was no place for this water to go out, since the water level in the river Ganges was also high. So certainly the government needs to be very smart. You talk of making a smart Patna, but certainly the government of the day should also be smart to tackle such type of situations here in Bihar.
Absolutely, Shyam, and we do hope, of course, that you and your family members are safe and dry and that everything's okay at home. Shyam Sundar reporting from Patna there as water has begun entering people's homes, pointing out that the government should have been able to do more. Our continued focus on the state of our economy, and there's more worrying news. 8 core sectors have recorded a further decline in output according to the government's own data. The output of coal, crude oil, natural gas, cement and electricity have declined about 0.5% in August. Now, you'll remember that the government's voices, including the finance minister, have constantly reiterated that we're recovering, that everything is fine with our economy and there is nothing to worry about. If that is the case, why are we seeing this sort of decline? And while we've seen a decline, coal's output at minus 8.6%, crude oil at minus 5.4%. These are important sectors. Natural gas also down. Note that on one hand, while the decline has come down further from the previous month of August, the month of September, most of this is in negative. And that's something we should be worried about as well. Joining me on the show, Professor Santosh Mehrotra, Professor of Economics at the Center for Informal Sector and Labour Studies at JNU University. He's a senior economist. We also have Mr. Ajay Dua, former Commerce Secretary, and Abhishek Mishra of the BJP will join us as well. Professor Mehrotra, good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm sure you've taken a look at the data and the numbers. Would you help us understand what this means?
Well, this is an ongoing trend which has been in evidence for at least 7 quarters. So it is only showing what we were all expecting. I don't think anyone should be expecting a turnaround in the economy for at least 2 or 3 quarters. And you are going to continue to see this. You see, the foundational problem, which in a sense has not been sufficiently recognized anywhere, is that consumption as a proportion of GDP has been falling, and consumption is essentially falling for the following reason. For the last 6 years, between 2012 and 2018, jobs have not been growing. When jobs do not grow, then new people who are entering the labor force find that they are looking for work and not finding it. So the open unemployment rate has increased. It has increased very sharply. From 2.2% to 6.1% in a matter of 6 years. In addition, those who are educated, who've got better education, are now facing unemployment rates which are double or triple to that which was prevailing in 2012. So when jobs are not growing, wages do not increase. When wages do not grow, then consumption tends to fall. Consumption somewhat falls, and at the same time, what we've seen that this government data itself is telling us that because incomes have been stagnant, people have been still trying to maintain consumption, household savings have fallen. So household savings as a proportion of GDP fell from 24% in 2012 to 17% in 2018. That's a remarkable fall of 7 percentage points in 6 years. That shows that the crisis is a structural crisis. It is not a cyclical crisis. It's a crisis of demand. So what you're seeing here is that, the core sectors are not seeing demand because the goods that are produced using these inputs are not seeing an increase in demand. Fairly straightforward.
Absolutely. And if I bring in Mr. Dua, you know, if we look at the specific breakdown of the numbers, like Professor Mehrotra was pointing out to us, cement, which grew at 7.9% in July, is showing a negative growth of minus 0.49% in the month of August. So it's gone from about 8% to minus 5%. Electricity was at 4.7, it's minus 2.9. Steel was at 8.9, it's now at 5%. The same with coal, crude oil and natural gas. I mean, coal should be particularly worrying, minus 1.6 to minus 8.6. Now, coal, steel, cement, electricity as core sectors, what can we read out of these numbers, Mr. Dua?
Faye, these 8 industries of the economy constitute 40% of the index of industrial production. Just these 8 industries by themselves, and a fall in their rate of growth, overall rate of growth, the fall has been in 5 out of 8 sectors in the month of August, while 3 other sectors, which you mentioned, have remained positive and probably experienced a hike in their rate of growth, that is fertilizers, steel, and refinery products. The fact of the matter is the rate of growth is the overall rate of growth between April and August compared to last year is now down to 2.4%, where in last year it was 5.7 in these 4 months. Compared to last year, we had 4.7% rate of growth in August 18, and now it is 0.5. And compared to the previous month, it was in July, we had a 2.7% rate of growth, which is now down to 0.5. So I think in all aspects, whether you compare it quarter-wise, you compare it monthly, or you compare it overall, we are seeing a perceptible decline in this 40% constituent of the index of industrial production. I see in this coal and electricity, both of them negative, much higher than previously. It is because the demand from the commercial sector, industrial sector for electricity has come down, and that has come down because their pace of economic activity, production, and other, you call it sales, retailing, wholesaling, all that activity in the commercial sector is lower than before. Second, cement is a clear reflection of the growth of the infrastructure sector, as well as the housing and the real estate sector as a whole. There it has come down, and we have figures to bear it out that the government expenditure in infrastructure in Q1 of this year, that is when the general elections were going on, there was a fall of government consumption as well as government investment. The fact is that all the measures for relief which the finance minister has put into motion are in second half of or later than second half of August, and they've had so far no effect on investment or consumption, and we will need to see whether they are able to kick in any kind of benefit, including from the tax cuts in the pace of investment. I apprehend that it is going to take a while. There is going to be a gap still for at least 1 more quarter, and that too, merely cutting down the rate of taxation is not going to bring in investments unless there are a whole lot of other things also attended to simultaneously. Just one last bit, merely reducing the tax rate is not going to get us the industries closing down in China to move here, because already Thailand and Vietnam have slashed their rate of the taxation rate for industries relocating from China to 10%. And we as a large country with huge huge requirement of funds for public programs cannot get into a race on cutting our taxation rates as well.
Right. So, Professor Mehrotra, picking up from what Mr. Dua said, that the government's announcements, or the finance minister's announcements, have actually come mid-August, and so obviously this is before that. Now, if we talk about the election phase, now the election phase ended in May. June, July, well, I'm looking at August numbers. Could it be that that election phase is still affecting us? And second question to you, Professor Mehrotra, do you believe that the announcements that have been made by the Finance Ministry, including the reduction of corporate tax, will that be the tonic that these numbers require? Will we see a recovery based on the back of those announcements?
Let me answer your second question first, because it's very easily answered. You see, all that will result from the reduction in corporate tax rates is that their profits will increase. It doesn't mean that their higher profits will necessarily get invested. Corporates invest when they have expectations of rise in demand, which brings me back to answering your first question, but it actually also brings me back to what I was saying earlier, that the only way you're going to get investment going up is if capacity utilization, which has been in the region of 70 to 75% for months on end, was beginning to go up. Because if capacity utilization increased, then corporates might feel, oh, okay, demand is on a sustained growth path, and it might make sense for us to invest for the next cycle. But there's not a chance that any increase in demand is going to result from any of this, because there is practically little action to increase demand. The increase in demand is now going to be a very slow process. The only chance that we currently might have is if there was some pump priming of the economy. One was hoping that disinvestment would take place quickly, that the monetization of government land, of railways land, was going to happen quickly. Because let's just remind ourselves that the 1.76 trillion rupees worth of windfall to the government from the RBI surplus transfer, most of that had already been taken into account. Let me explain how. Of that 1.76 trillion, 28,000 crores was already taken into account in the previous year's budget. Then, we already knew when the 1920 budget was being prepared that RBI was going to transfer surplus of the order of 90,000 crores. So 90 plus, so we knew all this. So 1920 budget has been prepared knowing that 90,000 crores was coming from RBI. So 90 plus 28 is 118. That leaves you precisely 55,000 crores which might be available to the government to increase public expenditure. But really, not even that. Let me explain why. Because in the 1920 budget, the estimates are based on growth rates which are not being achieved. And two, tax revenues have been estimated at levels which are determined by the growth rate. So in other words, there'll be shortfalls in tax revenues because of shortfalls in growth in 1920. So the 55,000 crores that remains from the RBI surplus is going to get absorbed in reducing the expenditure cuts that would otherwise have taken place in 1920. Okay. So the fiscal space simply isn't there unless the government suddenly starts borrowing. And if anything, the government has just cut 1.45 trillion rupees worth of corporate tax revenues.
Yes. So last question to Mr. Dua. Mr. Dua, for the help of our audience who might have found all of this very complicated or technical, the basic question is this. Does this mean things are going to get worse? Should we assume that people will continue to lose their jobs, that the mood of the nation will continue, economically at least, continue to remain what it is right now, which is subdued, even through the festive season?
Faye, I think the economy has bottomed out. I don't think things are going to get worse. Let's not kind of get too alarmed on things becoming worse than what they are today. I say this because the monsoon has been good during the Kharif season and the crop should be good, bringing in actually 4 to 5% more output than the usual as per the government's own estimate. Also, the monsoon has been well spread out, which means there is moisture in the soil, and that should facilitate early sowing of the Rabi crop soon after Diwali, and that augurs well for the next crop as well. And I do see the government, rather than cutting the tax rates on individuals, which it might do, the personal income taxes in the higher slab of 30%, that the government will take note of the fact that it needs to fund all the rural schemes which are ongoing schemes, whether Manrega, whether Pradhan Mantri Gramin Awas Yojana, Prime Minister's the Gramin Sadak Yojana, all of them are in position. Very easily money can be pumped into the rural economy, the kind of which Professor Malhotra talked about, pump priming. I am of the view that pump priming mechanism is available in the rural sector much more than in the urban. That is where the challenge is. How would we stimulate a similar demand in the urban areas when we do not have too many organized schemes through which we can reach out and augment the incomes in the hands of the people at the lower end.
Well, I just want to take this. I just want to take this.
Yes, to mechanisms in position.
Take this to Professor Malhotra. Professor Malhotra, do you agree that because of the monsoon this year, that this is possibly the bottom, which means that it won't fall any further, that we are going to see either plateauing or a recovery from here?
It's possible, but you know, I'm no astrologer. I think there's certainly good news in the sense that the monsoon has been good. And if the monsoon is good, then the revenues of the farmers will be better. So their consumption might revive. But we'll wait to see.
We will indeed wait to see. And we hope that the wait is not too long. But this is where it is right now. Core sectors, steel, cement, electricity, coal, crude oil, natural gas, all falling even further in August. It's not a good sign as of now, but hopefully, as both of the experts have told us, we expect maybe the monsoon will lead to some sort of uptick. The Supreme Court today decided to put off all cases related to the clampdown in Jammu and Kashmir by 1 day. The Supreme Court has cleared that it will not interfere in the detention of Jammu and Kashmir leader Farooq Abdullah. While hearing the MDMK chief's plea, Chief Justice Ranjan Gogoi stated that it is a matter of public safety. WICO had appealed against the detention of NCP patron Farooq Abdullah under the Public Safety Act. Earlier today, Union Home Minister spoke about the Kashmir clampdown and he said there are no restrictions in Jammu and Kashmir. The Supreme Court has also transferred all of the PILs placed before it in the matter of the clampdown of Jammu and Kashmir to the Constitutional Bench. Now remember, the Constitutional Bench was set up and it will begin hearing tomorrow. It was set up to examine the constitutional validity of the removal of 370 by the Government of India. It will also now, as per today's decision, hear all of the other matters that have been placed before the Supreme Court. To help us understand this better, we have right now with us Mr. Arima Sundaram, who's a senior advocate with the Supreme Court, and Mr. Dushyant Dave, also senior advocate with the Supreme Court, who will join us shortly. Mr. Sundaram, good evening, and thank you for giving us your time. It's always a pleasure to have a conversation with you. We know that constitutional benches of the Supreme Court are set up to examine constitutional matters. Basically, the order will change or alter the matter in the Constitution. So when we talk about the PILs that are now, as per today's decision, placed before the court, the detention of Mr. M.Y. Tiragami of the CPIM, the detention, according to Ekanshi Ganguly, there's a PIL against the illegal detention of children in Jammu and Kashmir. Do these matters come under the purview of a constitutional bench, or would they be faster dealt with by the court? Mr. Sundaram. All right, we seem to have an audio problem with Mr. Sundaram. I believe Mr. Dave can hear us now. Mr. Dushyan Dave, this is Faye D'Souza. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
All right. Mr. Dave, the question that I put before the panel this evening is this. The Constitutional Bench will examine all of the PILs according to the court's decision.
I heard that question.
Yes, if you would please.
I heard that.
If you would please.
I heard that question. Well, first and foremost, I must, I must express deep sense of disappointment and I think anguish at the way the Chief Justice has referred these matters after almost 2 months of waiting to a constitution bench. You see, you must realize one thing, that Supreme Court is a constitutional court and it's a custodian of the fundamental constitutional and legal rights of citizens. In that sense, Supreme Court is bound to protect the rights and Supreme Court cannot shirk and shy away from its duty. You must also remember that judges have taken an oath that they will deliver justice without fear or favor. And for 2 months, the Chief Justice, almost virtually pleaded with the government to file a reply to all these petitions which have challenged either the restrictions or the illegal detentions, etc., etc. And unfortunately, the government did not file any counter. So before the Supreme Court, there is no reason available, much less a good, sound reason as to why these restrictions have been imposed and why these detentions have taken place. We are talking about almost 3 million people who have been virtually locked down. I think today is the 57th day. And the judges had a constitutional duty to really require the government to file an affidavit. The last order of the Chief Justice said that government shall file an affidavit by today. Today, government didn't file an affidavit. And it's very surprising that judges take it so, casual when it comes to Jammu and Kashmir, especially when, 3 million people are locked up, that they just simply say, oh, we have no time today. But the Chief Justice knew right from the beginning that he is presiding over the Ayodhya bench, and therefore he did not have time to hear these matters. He should have, in the first instance, referred this matter to a proper bench comprising of senior judges. And he should not have waited for 8 weeks to tell that I don't have time. Of course, he knew that he didn't have a time, and we also knew that he didn't have a time. So I think the way the judges have really ceded the territory to the executive in this case makes me feel that judges are, I think, following the same path that the Supreme Court did, much to the disappointment of the nation during emergency in the famous ADM Jabalpur case. And I, as a lawyer, I feel deeply disturbed. We don't know, I'm not for a moment here commenting whether the government's, decision to do what it has done in Kashmir is right or wrong. But the government must at least satisfy the conscience of the court. The court must require it to be satisfied. Nothing of that sort is happening. So I really wonder under what pressure is the court working today? Or is it that court as a policy has taken a decision that whatever government does in Jammu and Kashmir, we will have our hands off? I think in that case, it's an extremely disturbing situation, very, very disturbing trend.
Mr. Sundaram, the fundamental right to liberty is perhaps the foremost right that we have as citizens. And it is customary that that be placed on, priority over everything else. Do you agree with Mr. Dave's view here?
No, I'm afraid I don't agree with Mr. Dave on everything he has said.
Okay.
The fact that looking after the fundamental rights of every citizen, the right to liberty, that there are important issues which ought to be addressed quickly, all that I agree with. But his opinion that the court seems to have ceded ground to the government or is dragging its feet, I'm afraid I cannot agree. I'll tell you why.
Look, whether we like to accept it or not, over the past about 6 to 8 months, there have been an enormous number of cases filed. A lot of cases filed, whether it's on issues of the Election Commission, conduct of elections, whether it's on disqualification of MLAs, whether it's on the Ayodhya issue, of course, and Kashmir. There have been a whole lot of cases filed. Judges are also human. They have to deal with the cases in the quickest they can. I don't think anybody can accuse anyone of dragging their feet. Let's look at the Kashmir case, for example. 8 weeks' time was given for the filing of a reply. The case was slated to be heard today. Today was the date for the case. Now, without any undue delay, what happened was that the first bench of the court said, look, since we're hearing Ayodhya, this is going to be a matter which is going to take time. We may not be able to give it the urgency that it needs to be given because we got another case also. Since there's a constitution bench already for the Article 370 issue, we'll list this before the constitution bench, which is coming tomorrow. Now, what has been done is it's been posted at the very earliest to ensure that there's no delay. Now, otherwise, if you say there are so many urgent cases before the court today, every lawyer is going and pleading that his case is the greatest urgency. And don't forget, the common man who has a case in the Supreme Court, it's also an urgent case for him. Now, everyone feels that sense of urgency, and every day you can see people pleading for cases to be heard because of the urgency of it. And the judges have to also see how much they can complete and what order to prioritize them in. Now, Kashmir is a priority issue. The court has dealt with it as a priority issue. It wasn't that today the first bench said, look, I'm afraid we are hearing this other matter, we don't have time, so we'll adjourn this by 4 weeks and hear it after we finish that. Rather than that, what the court said, and I think very practically was, look, there's already a constitution bench sitting from tomorrow to hear the Kashmir issue. Let them decide this issue also and bring this up before them tomorrow. So it's actually been pushed by 24 hours. And I don't call that a great delay. On the contrary, I think it was a very practical solution to what is a very overloaded court. Overloaded with a lot of litigation. And you must realize one thing, Faye. Today, cases are filed on every single issue since the beginning of this year, pre-election, on the EVM, whether this is all right, the lists are all right. Sundaram. Every single issue so far as elections were concerned. Cases have been filed so far as disqualification and governments are concerned. Cases are being filed, and now, of course, Kashmir is such an important issue. The court has to hear all of them, and I think the court has acted perfectly correctly by saying, look here, the constitution bench is sitting tomorrow. They'll take this up since they're anyway dealing with the Kashmir issue. I think it's very practical, and I can't see any criticism for that.
Mr. Sundaram, if I may ask you a question as a non-legal person or someone who doesn't have that keen an understanding of the law as you do, EVMs and Ayodhya, should they have the same priority or the same level of comparison as the fundamental liberty of millions of people in an entire state? Because the constitutional bench is examining the constitutional validity of the removal of 370.
Correct.
Yes, go ahead.
I think this is where you're making a mistake, Faye. It certainly does not mean that the issue of what's happening in Kashmir is of left's priority. On the contrary, personal liberty, as you said, is of the greatest priority. So let's not forget that that is the issue. Now, the point I'm saying is it's not as though it's not being dealt with the priority. You are saying, why can it not be dealt with the 3-judge bench? Why should it be dealt with by a constitution bench? The point is the case has to be heard, and it's being heard tomorrow. What is the objection that it's being heard by a 5-judge bench and not by a 3-judge bench? Surely you should be happy that a matter involving such great ramifications of personal liberty is being heard by a 5-judge bench. You should be happy about it. And I don't think it should be faulted. What are we saying? Oh, why is the case going tomorrow before a 5-judge bench? Why couldn't it have gone tomorrow before a 2-judge bench or 3-judge bench? I don't think that's the issue. You're right. Liberty is of top priority, which is why the court said, although there's already a constitutional benches, although there are no courts available, this constitution bench will hear the matter because of the priority to be given to it. And far from saying there's no priority, it has been given the topmost priority.
All right, Mr. Dave, your rebuttal, because Mr. Sundaram says it has been just adjourned effectively or moved for 24 hours, but it is day 59 of the restrictions and the clampdown in Kashmir. Yes, Mr. Dave.
Yeah,
please.
I think. Let me say one thing very clearly. I disagree with Mr. Sundaram with greatest respects. I think on every count, Mr. Sundaram is not right. If Mr. Chief Justice could fix it before a 5-judge bench tomorrow, nobody is faulting that. He could have as well done that on 5th of August when the matters came up first time. You know, you must remember one thing. The Chief Justice is the master of the role. And he even himself complained when Chief Justice Mishra was allocating matters, you know, in an indiscriminate manner, that the allocation of matters before certain benches is wrong. We know all that press conference. Why is it that every important matter which is sensitive, which government wants it to be decided in his favor, has been fixed by Chief Justice before himself and heard by Chief Justice himself? This was one of those matters which could have been referred to any other bench of Chief Justice's choice on 5th of August itself, and that bench would have been acquainted with the matter. That bench would have required the government to file the affidavit. Now, I have no doubt affidavits have not come till today. They will not come tomorrow. And, you know, that bench, new bench, is going to start the matter afresh. It's therefore really not right for the Chief Justice to have done what he did today. He should have on the first day sent the matters to an appropriate bench, maybe the same bench which is constituted now of 5 judges. So I think I am not against the bench of 5 judges hearing it. It's a good thing. But it should have been done on the first instance. I think the Chief Justice allowed 8 weeks to, roll by, which has really benefited the government in imposing completely unconstitutional and illegal restrictions on freedom of speech, on freedom of movement, on freedom of expression, on every conceivable way. The rights of 3 million people have been virtually taken away. Now, if the court is not conscious of that, if the court doesn't want to jealously guard that, then I must say that it is deeply disappointing. There was an emergency when ADM Jabalpur judgment was given. Today there is no emergency. Yet the judges have reacted perhaps in worse way than what they did during emergency.
Mr. Sundaram, your rebuttal?
All I can say is that Mr. Dave, while I fully appreciate his concerns, doesn't seem to consider one very important aspect. A case is filed. We know what the Kashmir issue is. We all know what the Kashmir issue is. A case is filed. The government is asked to reply. The case slated for hearing of the case was today. So, as Mr. Dave says, what if the 3-judge bench of the Chief Justice had heard the case today? Then it's all right. All his objection is that they should have heard the case today. Now, what has happened practically? Instead of hearing it today, it is going tomorrow before a 5-judge bench. A 5-judge bench which is already charged with the responsibility of looking into the constitutional virus of what has been done of the revocation of the 370 issue. Now, it is not as though it is being just pushed from one court to another. It was a matter which was slated for hearing only today. And that is the dates given. And that was the date to which it was to be heard. Now, all that's happened is, it's practically speaking, Faye, it's a delay of 24 hours between today's hearing and tomorrow's hearing. Do we want a delay of even 1 hour? No. But is a delay of 24 hours something in this case that we should turn around and say we're living in the ADM Jabalpur days or etc.? I don't agree with that at all. Let's be practical. Sometimes we tend to overreact to these kind of situations. Actually, look at it very practically. What did the Chief Justice say? He said, this is an issue. It's an important issue. It has to be heard immediately. But I have a constitution bench also going on. Therefore, I may not be able to hear it with the immediacy I can. Let me do the best thing possible. There is a constitution bench to hear the Kashmir issue, which is sitting tomorrow. I'm posting it tomorrow before them. Normally, one would have lauded this and said, that's great. Now, on the one hand, Mr. Dave objects and says, Chief Justice wants to hear all these matters himself. Now, what has happened here? The Chief Justice has, and I have a lot of objections to what he's saying about that, a lot of objections, but I'm not getting into a debate over that here. But I will say one thing. What has happened here? It's not coming before the first bench. It's coming before another constitution bench. Then why should Mr. Dave bring in an issue as though Chief Justice wants to hear it? And if the Chief Justice wants to hear an important case, what's wrong in that? But in this case, because he's with the other constitution bench, because he feels he can't deal with it with the urgency it deserves, That's why it's been moved by 24 hours before a constitution bench which is seized of the Kashmir issue. Look, let's be fair about this. We can always criticize anything. We can throw stones at anything. We can say, oh, this was done wrong or that was done wrong, pick holes. But I don't think this is an issue on which we should really pick holes of what's happened today. I don't think this is an issue which really merits this kind of criticism, and I object to that.
Okay, I just want to point out a couple of things, if I may, Mr. Dave. The Kashmir Times editor, Anuradha Bhasin's PIL went in on the 11th of August. The PIL before the Supreme Court on Kashmir, children being illegally detained, went in, if I'm not mistaken, on the 16th of September. We also have a PIL that a Kashmiri doctor has filed before the Supreme Court on basically saying that the medical profession is struggling right now because of the clampdown. This happened close to the 15th of August. So they have come in at different dates. They're not all recent and not all at the same time. Mr. Dave, go ahead.
See, Mr. Sundaram rightly says that there is a great urgency. If there is a great urgency on which we all agree, then the Chief Justice should have known that he has been sitting in Ayodhya matter since July. Therefore, he should never have taken up this matter because he knew that he is going to be busy. Frankly, the hearings that have taken place, and I have appeared in this matter on previous hearings, I think they were far from satisfactory because Chief Justice is really pressed with time, as Mr. Sundaram rightly says, with Ayodhya matter. Fair enough. But that's precisely the reason why Chief Justice should not have held on to this matter right from August till today. He should have referred, he should have constituted an important, appropriate bench and referred all these matters on the first day. He should never have taken up these matters. So I think the whole, approach of the court appears to be to really sideline the very important issue affecting lives of, after all, after scrapping of 370, these Kashmiris are citizens of India, full citizens of India. They are part of us. Today, you can't deny them the benefit of the constitutional guarantees which are available to you and me. And Chief Justice should have been conscious of that. I mean, government may be able to justify. I'm not saying government may not be able to justify. But the fact of the matter is that government has given no reason to the Supreme Court for 2 months. Far from giving a good reason why this clampdown has been imposed in the first instance, and it is continuing. If government was unsure of people's support, government should never have scrapped 370 in a hurry that it did. It should have won the hearts of the people in the first instance and then scrapped 370 if it felt that it was necessary to do so. But you can't take an action, lock down millions of people, and it's completely indefinite today. And the Home Minister yesterday said that this lockdown is only in the mind of the people. Now, if it is in the mind of the people, what prevents the government from filing an affidavit before the Supreme Court and saying that yes, there is no lockdown? Because they know that they can't make their statement on oath. And that's precisely the reason why government is shying away from filing affidavits in the court. So I feel that, this is an extremely sensitive issue. It affects the rights just because they happen to be Kashmiris. Doesn't mean that we, forget the constitutional and other rights of, 3 million people. And we take it so casually. I dare say that if this had happened in any other state like West Bengal or, Rajasthan or Madhya Pradesh at the hands of an opposition government, the judges would have clamped down on those government and said nothing doing. You cannot impose these kind of restrictions even for a day. So I really feel that we have, yes, it's a very serious issue. It's a very serious issue. I'm not for a moment saying that fighting terrorism is an easy issue. We all know we have been fighting terrorism for a long time. Nobody is saying that fight against terrorism should be compromised. No, it must be carried on with full vigor, but not against the whole, community of people. So that is something
Dave, are you suggesting that
told the government that if you want to fight, fight.
Mr. Dave, are you suggesting that the Supreme Court or the judges of the Supreme Court here are, are under pressure from the ruling government? Because effectively, that's what you've just said.
Well, I have not said that they are under pressure. So please don't assume that. What I have said is that judges have certainly ceded the territory to the executive. who stands up and says, you know, on 2 hearings, the learned Attorney General and Solicitor General told judges that 50,000 people have been killed in Kashmir in last 10 years, and you know, terrorists are coming from outside the country, etc., etc. Now, that is really nothing but creating a fear factor in the minds of everybody. And judges, you know, are conscious of what has happened. Perhaps that may have weighed with them. I don't know what weighed with them. But the fact of the matter is that in any ordinary case, I mean, look at habeas corpus. It's something where the law is, or the practice is, that judges should put aside every other matter and hear a habeas corpus petition, including a Ayodhya petition. So these large number of habeas corpus petitions were filed, no detention orders were produced for weeks on, and the judges just allowed the government to carry on with illegal detentions. So I feel that there is, there is a very serious issue here about the independence of judiciary, about the executive's role in taking away the constitutional rights, and virtual breakdown of rule of law. Okay. Administration of justice, what is known as checks and balance in a constitution like ours. Where is the checks and balance now? If the judiciary just sits like this for weeks together.
All right, for our audience who don't know, a habeas corpus is effectively an appeal placed before a court on behalf of someone who has been arrested, seeking that person's release unless there is a lawful reason presented to the court for that person being held in arrest. Mr. Sundaram, I'll give you the last word. Is there anything you want to say in response to what Mr. Dave has said?
All I want to say, Faye, is this, that what Mr. Dave has said really worries me, because he seems to feel that there is ceding of territory to the government. I don't know what he means about it, but what I got worried was the statement that if it was an opposition government in another state which had done it, the Supreme Court would have taken it up immediately, which seems to imply that the Supreme Court is really, to a great extent, playing favors, taking sides in the matter. And I'm afraid that I practice in the Supreme Court also, like Mr. Dave does, and I cannot subscribe to that at all. I believe we have our judges in the Supreme Court. By and large, we have a court which is a very strong court. Yes, there are periods of time when governmental decisions are such, and many, that the court says, look here, where do we stop interfering with government decisions? This has always been an issue with the separation of powers, as to where the court's jurisdiction would end and where they will not interfere with the government. These are always issues which will arise from time to time. There are conservative courts which feel that government's action should not be interfered with except in very rare cases. There are liberal courts which feel there can be far more interference. You may have different attitudes and ideologies amongst judges who are sitting in the court. But to say that the court has ceded territory, or that the government can in any way decide as to how a court is going to decide a case, I cannot agree with at all. And so far as this issue of Kashmir is concerned, I once again reiterate, because I don't want to go into the merits of it. Mr. Dave has commented on the merits of Article 370 removal, etc. I'm not going to comment on it because it's all before the bench. All I do want to point out to him is, as he points out, it is a matter of great urgency. It's a matter which the bench, it was slated to be heard today. Now it's being heard tomorrow. And I'm sure he will, with great conviction, be able to convince the bench that it's a matter of great urgency which should be dealt with immediately. How the bench deals with the case is a different issue altogether. That is not the scope of this debate. Scope of the debate is there anything wrong in having the matter adjourned from today to tomorrow for the Constitution bench to hear it? How the bench deals with the case is a different issue altogether, on which I don't think any of us can comment. It's a matter which will be sub judice. But one thing I will say very clearly, I do not think that this issue of a 24-hour adjournment from today to tomorrow is a matter which should create so much of furor. I do not believe that at all. As to what happens tomorrow, Mr. Dave will be there, and I'm sure that he will press for whatever reliefs he wants.
Right, gentlemen, I'm going to leave it there, but I thank both of you for being so generous with your time and helping our audience understand different points of view of this particular matter, as the Supreme Court now will take up the question of the constitutional validity of the removal of 370 in Jammu and Kashmir before its constitutional bench tomorrow. It will also look at the various PILs that have been filed before the Supreme Court on matters from the medical professionals who felt that the clampdown was affecting their ability to provide treatment, the journalists who felt that the clampdown was affecting their ability to do their job, and of course the activists who filed petitions before the court about the matter of minors being taken into custody as well. All of this falls now to our Supreme Court starting tomorrow, and we look to the court to deliver its voice to the people of Kashmir. In the meantime, as citizens of the rest of the country, we have to pay close attention to information that we're getting from Kashmir, because at the end of the day, if they don't have the voice, we do. And we have to ask more questions on behalf of those who cannot ask questions right now, because their ability to ask questions is being affected, in the very least, by this clampdown. Are people able to get the kind of medical attention that they need? Are you able to call an ambulance if someone is having a baby or someone is having a heart attack in your home? If phone lines are not working, are ambulances able to reach you? Are people able to function in businesses? Are they able to do their jobs? Are they able to pay salaries? Are they able to pay wages? These are questions we should ask. Are schools functioning? Are children in Jammu and Kashmir getting their basic right to education? These are questions we have to ask on behalf of the people of Jammu and Kashmir.